Good morning. So today we're going to talk about something that I think doesn't get nearly enough attention, and that's how kids who are bullied and who are the victim can sometimes become bullies themselves. This cycle, which Dr. Terence Webster-Doyle called the bully victim cycle, is something we've mentioned in quite a few episodes so far, so we figured it was time to finally give it the spotlight it deserves. This cycle is actually pretty common and it shows up in classrooms and playgrounds and even as we become adults. And it often starts when you're being hurt or left out in some sort of way. And eventually that pain can turn into retaliation. Understanding this cycle really helps us be able to interrupt it early. So instead of asking, why is this child acting out and being so mean, we can start asking questions like, what happened to them? And when we're able to do that, we can really start to actually support both the child who's being hurt and the one who's causing the harm. And hopefully we can stop that bully victim cycle. So let's start with the retaliation part of this bully victim cycle and kind of explore what we mean when we say that. Dr. Terence Webster-Doyle talked about this a lot in his work and how it shows up in kids who've been bullied and that they don't necessarily just carry that pain with them, but sometimes they also carry on the behavior. And when that hurt isn't addressed properly, it can sometimes come out sideways. Gary, what does that kind of look like in your experience?
Yeah, I've seen children who are normally quiet suddenly start to lash out and insult other children when they've never done that before. So that raises a red flag for me that something's going on in this child's life. And when you explore a little deeper, get into the second or third layer, you'll find out someone's been very mean to them. So their natural reaction is just to lash out.
Yeah, they're kind of trying to feel almost in control or in power again by doing that.
And I've seen boys and girls bully differently. I will generalize by saying that girls do it in a couple of manners. They exclude others. I've seen that happen. And our teachers will go up and intervene and say, well, you can't exclude anyone. And then I'll find that the little girl that was being excluded will sometimes turn around and exclude someone else. So they're just passing that bullying behavior on.
An interesting thing to be watching for sure, as a teacher or a parent.
Yeah, boys seem to be a little more direct about it. They'll insult you or they'll hit you.
Yeah.
Girls often do not take that route. So, but both routes are bullying.
They absolutely are. Do you find that they'll take on new kinds of behavior or kind of copy what's been happening to them?
I think that they're copying what's been happening to them. I think they've learned that it's a transactional behavior. In other words, a boy came up and grabbed this boy's popcorn and said, "This is mine."
Yeah.
Well, that child may turn around and see someone that he perceives to be weaker than he is, and then take something of theirs.
So it's a
So
lot of mimicking.
he's learning that that's how you get what you want.
It's very much mimicking that behavior that they're seeing because they're saying, yeah, want that control, want that want. They don't want to be treated how they were, so they turn around and do that to someone else.
Yes.
And that can really get quite tricky because it looks like the child just kind of flipped and their
Yes.
behavior is just so kind of out of left field and they're becoming maybe this bad child. But like you said, if you dig deeper, it's because it's that loop, it's that bully victim cycle, and they have started to become the bully because that's what's been happening to them.
Yes. We have a daycare center, a lot of kids. So we can develop norms for the group. This is how we treat each other.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes, and you can do that in a classroom. It becomes a little more difficult as a parent.
What's the difference in between a parent and a group, kind of a group situation?
Well, because I think there's a lot of learning that goes on in a group because everybody's got a differing perspective. So if you're talking about norms, like treat others like you want to be treated, you'll get a lot of input, and it means a lot of different things to different people. Like, yeah, don't make fun of my haircut, and yeah, I wouldn't make fun of your braces. And it goes around, and I think it gets deeper. Parent can get at the crux of the same thing, but they're going to have to give a bunch of iterations to get through the subject.
Yeah, because they're working just directly with only their one child instead of a
Yes.
group of them, to have that
Yes.
kind of shared language around it and shared expectations.
Yes, rather than it coming across as don't do that, there's an explanation why.
So also in this kind of retaliation that kids are going through, it can feel like a strength for them. especially when they're not given those kind of other tools of maybe your classroom having talked about this. And maybe it's feeling like the only way they can kind of be protecting themselves if they're not being taught how to do it otherwise. And you can have a lot of social pressure in that too, because maybe kids are feeling that they have to retaliate so that they avoid being the target. It's not just because they have been the target and suddenly they turn around, maybe trying to stop that happening again in the first place. So then they think, hey, if I kind of go along with the same thing that's happening and other people are doing, maybe I can kind of fit in with that and avoid being targeted myself.
Yeah, and it's a way to get accepted by the bully. If you bully others in front of the bully, then maybe the bully isn't going to bully you.
Yeah, they bring you into their group.
Yes, yeah,
or even if it's not into their group, at least you're not targeted.
it's true.
I think another thing too, when we really focus on only kind of that bullying behavior without looking behind it, we're missing a lot of that big picture that Dr. Terence Webster-Doyle always talked about, which is a lot more about having curiosity into the situation over just outright blaming and making the children feel bad about it.
Yeah.
When we can ask kind of questions about like what's going on underneath here, instead of just why are they being such a bad child,
Yes.
then we can just be a lot more curious about what's happening and start to actually address kind of this cycle instead of just throwing your hands up.
In the animal kingdom, there's a clear pecking order with every species, every species.
There
And,
is.
and that's also occurs in humans. There's,
Mhm.
you're looking for the alpha leader of the pack, and then, you're trying to get in with that group. So you'll often mimic what, the leader does, good or bad.
It's a lot of social pressure for that.
Yes,
You can see,
absolutely.
I mean, if looking in schools, you can see that with quote unquote kind of the popular kids, and they can often be very mean, but
Oh,
people seem to want to get into that group.
and that's what happens, and they become some of the worst bullies.
Yeah.
The popular children, because they can pick and choose who they want to be friends with, and everybody wants to be friends with them.
Mhm.
When other children on the other end of the spectrum that feel clumsy and
Mhm.
awkward struggle to get any friends, and a lot of that is self-inflicted because of the way that they look at themselves, their
Yeah.
self-image. Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, talking about retaliation, a part of this that maybe doesn't get noticed as much is desensitization. Really talked about how kids, when they're the ones being targeted or the ones doing the bullying, or even just kind of like the bystanders, they can start to feel kind of numb to what's happening.
Yeah.
And the behavior becomes so normal that they stop
Yes.
seeing it as a problem. And that's a big problem for sure in like the popular circles, like we were talking about. It just becomes so normalized
Yeah.
that it's not being recognized for what it is.
Or it's the baby brother who has
Yeah.
two older brothers
Yeah.
who they've just beaten the tar out of for years,
Hmm.
laughed at him, teased him. He is numb to the whole thing. And these are the kids that come in and they don't really care if you try to bully them. They're almost bully proof. But to try to change their bullying behavior is a little more difficult because they've just grown up in it.
That is not easy to do. I mean, looking outside of kind of the kid situation,
Yeah.
desensitization happens on such a large scale through like the
Yes.
media and the news, that maybe like when we were younger, when we heard all this terrible things happening around the world, it struck us. And it just sounds horrible to say, but it is that desensitization. It strikes us a lot more when we first heard it.
Yeah.
But when you're just bombarded with it all the time, your brain almost just shuts it off so that it doesn't affect you as much. It's not because like you don't care about what's
Right.
happening. It's almost like a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
Same thing can happen with kids, is that when they're being bullied all the time and if it's not being addressed, it kind of just fades into the background. Like your example with the boys, like if that's not being addressed, they don't even notice it anymore.
No, they just think that's a regular way of, you know,
Yeah.
getting what you want.
Yeah.
So,
It's just how it goes.
yeah. So, I've seen a lot of times the youngest in the family is the most skilled bully, unbelievably skilled at,
Interesting.
getting what they want. They use every avenue,
Yeah.
insult, fist.
Do you think that's because like they've been watching what's happening and what's working for their siblings?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
They've learned that that's how you get what you want.
Yeah.
But then you get them in the school systems and they get into, I mean, I'm generalizing, but a lot
Yes.
of them get into more trouble than their older brothers because they've learned that this is a way of life. But
Mhm.
in school, the norms start to come out, what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do, and
Mhm.
how you're supposed to treat each other. So
Yeah,
a
well,
lot of that gets ironed out. Yeah,
that goes back to what we were talking about earlier of how you can work with your one child but then the group when you're in a classroom, it's just completely changed. That kind of desensitization, it's not just affecting one or two kids. Like if you get that into a school situation, maybe teachers aren't addressing, or it's somewhere teachers aren't seeing, because that's often where it happens. And
yeah,
just all the other kids are letting it go on. It kind of just becomes that's what it is if no one steps in to address that.
right. And that's when you have a lot of trouble.
Hmm.
That's when kids get a lot of psychological damage if it's not being addressed, and that's when they can carry it with them for life.
Feeling like none of your classmates or peers care,
Yeah,
that's very traumatic.
and I mean, if you've got one child in a class and he consistently bullies other kids, and the other kids see that nothing happens, there's a fear that permeates, and that's
Mhm.
what damages. I mean,
Yeah. And that just keeps it going because maybe then again they think, well, nothing's going to happen. So maybe I have to join in so it doesn't happen to me. It's
right, right,
just goes
right,
around and around.
sure,
I guess really what we're just saying here is that to be able to change the environment, we're not just talking about like stopping the bully. We really have to be teaching kind of like that empathy and respect to all the kids so
yeah,
that they're not being as desensitized to it so that they can step in when they notice something's wrong and actually show up for each other because
yeah,
it's so important kids are able to do that and not just rely on the adults to kind of solve that problem for them.
true, very true.
All right, so something that can be tricky is noticing when a child who has been bullied, who has been the victim, starts becoming a bully themselves. And that is really what this bully victim cycle is changing from the victim into the bully. Again, this is something Dr. Terence Webster-Doyle focuses a lot on, but he really talked about that if a child is not given the space to process their experiences and are left to carry it on their own shoulders without being able to discuss that or have assistance going through that, they often start to repeat it. It's not so they want to hurt other people, but it's because what they've learned. And oftentimes they're not really realizing that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's where it's great in a school system or group setting for someone to intervene and say that's not how we ask someone for something, or that's not how we treat each other, and to reinforce what the norms are. We
Mhm.
treat each other with respect. We don't insult each other. We don't grab things from one another.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, that norm becomes their norm.
So if you're noticing some kids, like maybe they're using more sarcasm or being extra controlling in group work, that's
Yeah.
then when you can kind of take them aside and talk with them about what's going
Right.
on.
Right, and I'll often address it in the group. All right,
Mhm.
no, that's against the norms. We don't interrupt. We don't do this. We don't do that. The whole group learns that way. Because when you pull a child aside, you may solve it, but you're not helping the rest of the group. So
Oh, absolutely. And even pulling kids aside can probably make them feel defensive, just put kind of their guard up. But there's
right,
definitely a lot to be said for having those group lessons. Also, something to think about in these group situations is that bullying often can kind of thrive in silence. So if that's not being talked about or teachers and adults are not addressing that, it can just make it a lot easier for that cycle just to repeat itself and really tighten. So there's really kind of two ways you can go about doing this, and they can work together. And the first one is to talk with them privately. And this, again, depends on your situation, depends on the child. But if you do talk to them privately, it's important not to just jump to punishment because, like we kind of said earlier, if they're misbehaving and you pull them aside, it's pretty often they'll probably get defensive and expect that they're going to be punished. So you can change that thinking of what happens when you talk to them privately and really dive deep into why they're acting that way. So maybe sometimes it's anger or embarrassment. Maybe they just don't know what to do with the emotions they're feeling that's a big part of growing up is trying to
yeah,
understand your
yeah,
emotions. So if you just talk to them privately, kind of start to understand what's going on, just figure that out with them. That's kind of the first step to breaking this, whether they are the victim or the bully, just talk with them. Keep it light. You don't need to ask like really invasive questions. Just get that confidence with you and that safe space that they could talk to you.
I know with our classes, when I'm teaching the martial arts, MapStar style, I will, introduce the subject. Tell me what a bully is. And we'll have 20 kids in a big circle. And there's 8 or 10 renditions of what that bully is. Now tell me who's been bullied. 80% of the class's hands go up,
Yeah.
with differing degrees of severity. And then those classes will take from there, we'll talk about behavior. What's acceptable behavior? How should we treat each other? And in my setting, it's a group and it's hierarchical. So I'm the boss, I'm the sensei. They're there to learn martial arts, but we're really teaching map stars throughout the whole thing. As many examples as you can give a child or elicit from them. The deeper the understanding becomes of the problem, how to identify it, and ultimately how to deal with it.
Exactly. So again, the two ways to deal with this cycle, talk with them
Yes.
privately, and then the group work. They both work so well together. Another great part about the group work like you do, Gary, is that it really helps the kids feel all connected.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And I think, yeah, when you can feel kind of that sense of community and that connection,
Yeah.
it's just automatically going to be way less likely that they're going to even fall into these cycles to begin with.
Right. Right. And we have kids, it's a repetitive process when you teach map stars because you have to practice it. And it's why it goes so well with martial arts, because you have to practice that. You have to practice the same things. So the group becomes tighter because there are upper belts, as we call them, people who've been at it longer, who know more of the map stars program than the person just coming in. So there's a spirit where we help one another and, help them with ideas and how to be respectful and kind.
So that'd be really good for like a peer mentorship program in a school too,
Yes.
where maybe the older kids have gone through map stars and they can practice their leadership qualities and then have kind of a similar idea as the martial art classes where they're working with the younger kids on it.
Yes. Yeah. It's sort of like a big brother or a big sister program. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. And then you're building that whole community spirit too, where it's not so separated by grades.
Right. Right.
Something that we've talked about in other podcasts as well, but it's definitely worth repeating in this one, is that labeling kids as the bully or as a victim can potentially make things worse because those labels tend to really stick if they're reinforced a lot, and it can become harder for kids to kind of see themselves or especially by others as anything other than that label. And it becomes kind of their whole role or in their identity in school or in whatever environment they're in, instead of just something that they're maybe struggling with or going through. When we're able to kind of focus on their behavior instead of labeling them, it's much more likely that we're going to miss that backstory of kind of what's happening and why they're acting this way and why they're behaving that way. That's what we need to be able to help them.
No, you have to go after the behavior, not the person. We're not going to stop bullying, but we're certainly going to suppress it. And we're certainly going to give children the tools to deal with it through the MapStars program.
Yeah, exactly. We obviously can't completely stop it, but we can do a lot to prevent it and help kids from turning into a bully when they've been hurt. Because that's really where it starts, is they've been hurt and we want them to be able to recognize those patterns without being shamed or blamed and move forward in healthier ways. So for kids that have been the victims, and if they're maybe feeling kind of left out of the group, what are kind of some ways that we can help them become maybe more reintegrated into that group feeling without going down the route of they have to bully to fit in with the group?
What I like to do, and again, in my group setting, is we'll go around the room and say, when you do this to me, it makes me feel. So there's a deeper understanding of how bullying impacts us, So even the person who's a fledgling bully is quickly going to get the feedback that everybody understands that what it feels like to be bullied. And I mean, ultimately, as you go on in the class, you can say, who's been a bully here? And you get these hesitating hands to go up, and you'll affirm that, yeah, Yeah, I bullied someone, and that isn't the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, part of that on both sides of the victim and the bully, recognizing that we've all been in both those roles. And it doesn't make you a bad person to have been in
no,
either of those roles because we've all done it. It's really part of being human. So when you can recognize that within other people, you're not going to feel so isolated and like you're in the wrong.
no, there's no judging that goes
Mhm.
on. It's all about the behavior.
It
So,
is. It's all just accepting that and then being able to work on it,
right,
bettering yourself.
absolutely right.
I guess the whole thing about this whole conversation has been that breaking that bully victim cycle is not about having like you're not going to have one perfect conversation or do one magical activity that's going to fix everything. It's really those little things that you do day after day, week after week, month over month. I mean, we've talked about this so many other episodes too, but it's just that consistency is
Yeah.
really what is going to make a big difference and the
Yeah.
biggest difference.
And I mean, even, if it's the parent, if it's only the parent that's teaching this, you go to your role play. You go to the role plays on this that Mapstar has. And it's easier for a child to step out of themselves if they're doing role play, because it
Yes.
gives them freedom to really tell you what is going on, you
It
know?
does. It's an interesting way of kind of separating it from themselves, but still tell you what's happening.
Yes,
And the great thing about MapStars too, and all our programs, is there's the freedom to just have discussions. There's no like right or wrong answers. You're not trying to get a certain answer or a certain
yes,
response from a child. It's just
right.
helping them explore it, and it's all good if they mess up. It's not about being perfect. It's all about learning and
Yes,
having a comfortable space for them. So I think the biggest takeaway from today is that victims and the bullies are not two separate people. They can very easily be the same person. They're the same child, just at different points in this very painful cycle. So when we're able to take the time to understand what's beneath that bullying behavior, we can respond with a lot more empathy and make much more of an impact. We can start actually asking the right questions and understanding what they need and what support they need to be getting out of this cycle. So I think one thing that we would like to leave with you this week is that choose a group activity or role play that helps build empathy. You can find those in MapStars. You can find them in our other resources or on a newsletter. And it can be like a kindness challenge or a group reflection or a role play, just something that you can start working on. It's not going to fix it overnight, but it does start creating that space where kids can actually